guys, this week I'm going to show you how I made this carbide cutting tool for the lathe. Stick around. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of BS with AJ. As I said before, this week we're going to be finishing up our carbide tool. Last week was part one where we did all the metal work, and this week we're going to be finishing up the handle. We're going to be taking a piece of firewood that I bought from a local store in just a bag. It's a piece of hickory, and it come in these pretty large chunks, and so basically I wanted to try and use that. I thought it'd be a real good cheap way to make a handle. So anyway, before we get started with all that, if you like videos like this, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and consider supporting BS with AJ on Patreon so we can do bigger and better projects for you guys. Also, this video is brought to you by the letter U that my son's holding, because you are going to enjoy this video. Anyway, let's get started. Alright guys, well, it's been a full 24 hours, so this glue's had plenty of time to dry and set up and everything. So basically right now what I'm going to do is start turning it. As you can see, I made this from just some firewood, and it was kind of hard to get it to cut straight, of course. So anyway, I've got basically what I did is I took the weird shaped pieces I had here and made sure I had one flat side, and then I went ahead and cut my recess in here so that way it would fit my 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch metal bar through here. So again, it's pretty rough right now. So what I want to do is make sure that I have these holes in the very center. Since there's a hole there, I can't just use the points. What I've done now, I've made a little wooden cone basically on this side, and I've got my 60-degree cone on this side. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and turn it between centers here. And I know it's going to try and move on me some. I'm actually going to use the carbide tool that I started making yesterday. I tried it yesterday a little bit without a handle, and honestly you can use it that way without any trouble at all. But we are going to put a handle on there to make it a little more stable and things like that, of course. So basically we're going to go ahead and set this up. And the main thing I want to do, we got to get it to the certain speed that it's not going to try and wobble the whole thing. I've already tested it, and for this specific piece it was around 2,000 RPMs. It wobbled the least amount. The whole table here, since it's not secured down onto my tabletop. But anyway, so I'm going to turn it at whatever speed will get it to where it's more even, and I'm just going to kind of get it as even as I possibly can, and then I want to turn a tenon on one side so that way I can put it in the chuck jaws and go from there. But so it may try and spin on me a little bit as I'm turning, but I'm hoping that carbide tool, the carbide is sharp enough that it'll cut, you know, if I take real easy steps, it won't spin that much. We're going to find out. Let's go ahead and get started now. All right, guys, let's go over what we got to do now. We have our carbide cutter made. We've got it attached and everything. We've got our handle turned and everything. Unfortunately, I had to make my handle in 2 separate parts. You can make yours in 1 part if you have a big enough piece of wood. The wood I was using wasn't quite long enough, so I went ahead and made it in 2 separate pieces. So it's not too big a deal. It's just an extra step, of course. The very first thing that I'm going to do is actually attach these 2 together. I'm going to use some CA glue, and I've got a spray that'll actually dry it within 8 seconds. So I'm going to spray that on here, put the glue on, and hold it in place until it sets up, which shouldn't take very long, like I said, about 8 seconds or so. Once we're done with that part, that'll make sure that our handle is lined up the way we want it to and everything. Then we're going to start prepping our bar here. We need to sand it down. I'm going to use some 80 grit sandpaper, get all this paint off or whatever that is, that coating there off. We're going to go ahead and sand it down, put a couple notches in the corners here, just give that epoxy something to grab onto. Next, we're going to be working on our copper piece here. On the very end, we're going to be putting that on here. A lot of people, when they make these tools, they put a little copper coupling or something on there. The way the diameter mine worked out to be is going to be a 1-inch copper tube that I need to use. So just double check. You need to have the outside diameter be smaller than the inside diameter of whatever you're using. So if you're using a 1-inch pipe like I did, it needs to be slightly under 1 inch and things like that, of course. We're going to cut this pipe down to about 1 inch or something like that. I think either I've got 3/4 or 1 inch. I'll have to remeasure that here in a minute. But basically, we just want it sticking a little bit above that. And that's going to help hold this together because we do have 2 pieces glued together for that square hole that we made. That'll help hold it together up there. And it'll also make it look a little bit better. So that's going to be our next step. We're going to go ahead and glue this into place, and then we'll come back and glue this. We may do it all at the same time. I'm not 100% sure. We'll play it by ear a little bit. But basically, I did the math here, and you're going to have to figure out the volume for the hole that you got. So I've got a square hole here that's 9/16 by 9/16 to make sure I had enough room for my 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch rod to go through. So you'll have to figure the difference there. And then on this piece, because I didn't want to have to cut another one in half and wait for the glue to dry, I went ahead and just drilled a hole that would actually fit the bar here without having to sand down the edges or anything. So this is a little bit oversized. It's a 3/4 inch hole, and it's about 8 centimeters deep or something like that. So you got to figure the difference of that, of course, too. What I ended up with is I need to make about 100 milliliters of the epoxy here, which is close to about 4 ounces, something like that. This is half and half mix, so we're going to do 50 milliliters of part A and 50 milliliters of part B. We're going to mix it together for 1 minute. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pour a little bit down here. Once I get this glued together, we'll pour some of it down the hole there, so that way it helps fill up the bottom here for sure. Then we'll go ahead and coat the bar here after we've got it prepped, slide it into place, and then if we have any left over, we'll probably go ahead and try and pour it in as well. We will need a little bit, of course, to glue this piece on, whether we make some more here in a minute or if we just go ahead and do it all at once, whichever way it ends up working. But that's what we're going to be working on here for the next few minutes. So I'm going to put it all on fast motion, that way you don't have to sit there and listen to me go over step by step again. So anyway, so let's go ahead and get started now. All right, guys, well, here's our final product here. So I went ahead and refinished the handle a little bit better. Whenever I put these two pieces together, I could feel a little bit of an edge here because they weren't exactly the same size. It was just slightly off, and it also didn't line up perfectly when I went to glue it together. So it's not a big deal. I sanded it down with 120 and then 220 over this whole edge here, and then I went ahead and put another coat of boiled linseed oil over it. So it's nice and smooth now, no problems at all. I did take a little bit of the burnishings on the end here, but just on the bottom side. So like I said, that's not a big deal or anything to me. I did go ahead and let me show you this up close here. I went ahead and sanded down the copper pipe here a little bit, one to get rid of the sharp edges on the top here, but also to shine it up a little bit. It looks nice for now. Of course, it's going to dull out in the future, obviously, but that's not a big deal. But yeah, here's the handle. It's finished up and everything. And here on the tip, I'll show you this. I kind of angled this down at a fairly steep angle here, but I couldn't go too steep because of the where the screw actually is there. You can kind of see it sticking out just barely there a little bit. So I couldn't overdo it. I couldn't make the angle too sharp or anything. But I did go ahead and round over these edges and everything. I sanded all that nice and smooth, so that way it wouldn't get in the way of the cutting edge here. As you can see there, the cutting edge is quite a bit further out than the bar here. So you need to make sure and get that back pretty far, of course. I went ahead and made another one here, as I showed you in the very beginning of the video. I've not put a handle on here yet, and as I said in the beginning, honestly, you can use this as it is. I actually used the one without the handle to make the handle for it. So I switched out the square and the round tips to make everything work pretty good. And honestly, it's kind of comfortable. It's not that big a deal. So if you just want to have a carbide cutting tool and you don't feel like making a handle for it right now or anything, you can just do the first couple steps that I showed you here to get your carbide tool attached here, cut it down to whatever length you want. I did mine 2 foot long, and then you're ready to use it. I'll show you how I did the end here. I went ahead and notched that down to where the square is actually level with the top of this here. I just wanted to try and see how it worked out. I've seen most of the tools you can buy online are like that. And honestly, it looks pretty good. And I went ahead and tapered all the ends down this way here, as you can see. So that way, again, none of the metal is in the way of the cutting edge up here. Again, I can't do a whole lot with the radius here because you can see the screw kind of sticking out a little bit through the back. You want to make sure you have as many threads as you can get on there to hold that carbide tool into place, of course, because you don't want that flying off at you as you're using it. That would be a very bad scenario. Anyway, like I said, here's our final product. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and consider supporting BS with AJ on Patreon so we can do bigger and better projects for you guys. And I'll see you next week.